tattoo, just to confuse you even more. There wasn't much light, so he didn't notice it until she got on top of him. And only after his petit moi left them slightly apart, taking a breather and each other in, did he venture a closer look. Above her left breast, at first glance, it seemed amateurish. In places the ink not joined up. He amused himself with the notion it was a long shrimp or small lobster. Yes, definitely a lobster, you could tell by the tail. She'd been in a good mood until he teased her about it. Now pointing at the tattoo, declared she was a Scorpio. As he turned towards the curtains, head bowed, the tail's shadow grew huge. When he felt her touch again, his body went numb, his breath stilled. It's a bit Roald Dahl, that one, isn't it? And the next one is a slightly more unusual situation. This is positing the idea of someone who's been involved in an on-off relationship with someone, sexual relationship, hasn't seen them for a long time, and then they suddenly appear and they've had some work done. And he's confronted with this situation of not knowing what work they've had done. And this is called There Are Other Ways of Removing a Tattoo. She stood there naked and said, "What do you think?" It had been 2 years since I'd seen her and didn't want to say the wrong thing, which can have consequences even if you comment on a top. Cosmetic surgery is much more serious, so I just ummed and oohed, then tried to stare in a positive, approving way. "Oh no, nothing's been done to my boobs," she said, laughing. So I knew my wordless diplomacy succeeded. Took me on a tour of her knees, stomach and thighs. In Argentina, the prices are much cheaper, and she got a great deal. Her tattoo had gone when the lipo was done. She'd never liked it much anyway. I remembered the devil's face, his little fork. Thank you. Hang on, I mislaid one. Just a minute. No, I haven't. I'll end one with 2 love poems of a song. Although the first one does have a bit of Cold War rhetoric in it. It's about a defecting ballet dancer. And it is true, essentially. It's called The Exchange. Telegrams to and fro didn't prepare Li Kunxing for what he'd find after he was met by English Ben. Crackle on the intercom had surprisingly evoked how Madame Mao's guards twisted his limbs around, so they felt like a series of wavy lines implanted in the centre of his pain. The voices he heard, not in his head. They were instructions on how to dance politically, drilled steps, so he responded as a dog to a whistle. Each time he performed for the People's Beijing Ballet. The sound of the plane landing introduced freedom. Being overwhelmed by the choice on American radio instilled receptiveness to Ben Stevenson's choreography. The repetition internalised in his steps, and red star in his cap, replaced by loose-limbed flowing movements to Rhapsody in Blue. The old tinny Gershwin recording inspired him at rehearsals. Opening night in Houston became his first huge success. He had been ordered not to fall in love in the West, but Lee would have loved Anna, whatever the circumstances. A fellow dancer in the troupe, both thought they were blessed. Could have been the end for Ben's exchanges with China, though he'd known nothing until after they were married. Letting down Ben, Lee went to the embassy to explain defiance of that unbreakable rule was down to him alone. Their only thought to grab him on Chinese soil, so Ben, Barbara Bush and Reagan appealed to Deng Xiaoping. Release, a curtain raiser. He became Houston Ballet's principal dancer. His parents allowed one trip out to applaud. Thank you. And the last one is called Only Once. I thought that when I saw you I might fall in love with you again, and now I know I haven't, was how my ex-wife Anne greeted me as we drove from Boston Airport to her apartment near Brattle Street. I wanted to say her response might be coloured by the fact I'd recently acquired my worst ever haircut at the Sassoon hairdressing school. How the girl cutting my hair was American, and I so loved her Americanness as it reminded me of Anne's. I agreed to her cutting more off so she'd carry on talking. But Anne's words silenced me. I felt better when I saw her books familiar from our decade together, especially LBJ's Vantage Point. She liked Lyndon Johnson despite opposing the Vietnam War, because he had pet beagles like her family's. It was hard to talk with Anne continually roller skating up and down the apartment. I later realised it was one of the ways she kept occupied between going to AA meetings during early stage sobriety. When she phoned me in London and confessed to being an alcoholic, things about our final years together began to make sense. Anne had always been a sleep talker, with eyes wide open as if awake. This happened more frequently until she would ask me every night to check for creatures under the bed. I'd get up, turn the light on, look, show her everything was all right. In the middle of that first night at her place, I was awoken by Anne calling out my name. I got up and stood outside her bedroom. If she'd called my name again, I would have gone into her, but she didn't, so I didn't. There were no more nights like that. There were thousands of nights like that. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Wonderful couple of sets from Peter tonight. I'm delighted to have you here. So thanks very much, Peter, and more applause for Peter Atwood, also known as Paul Newman and Marlon Brando. And Modigliani, of course. Okay, well, we're going to invite back to the stage Jasmine and Corey. Thank you, Jasmine.
This is a poem called Storm. When my arms and legs were striped with red, it was you who dared to come close.